Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be facing off the all-new MSI Claw against the Asus ROG Ally. This is something I've had a lot of viewers asking about, so I figured I'd go ahead and make a video. And we're really going to focus on watt-for-watt performance, so we will be running some benchmarks. We're also going to be testing some games. And as you know, both of these manufacturers, MSI and Asus, have released two different variants of these handhelds. For this video, we've got the highest-end model for both. So with the MSI Claw, we've got the new Intel Core Ultra 7 155H. And for the ROG Ally, we've got that AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme. Both of these handhelds feature a 7-inch 120Hz IPS display, and to tell you the truth, I really do like the way the MSI Claw screen looks over the ROG Ally. It's actually a really nice screen that MSI chose to use. We've got some super deep blacks, really great viewing angles, but both of these are IPS screens. Another thing both of these handhelds have in common is they're both running Windows 11 instead of Linux like the Steam Deck, and we can actually take the wattage up on these quite high. Now obviously, when upping the TDP on any of these handhelds, battery life is significantly decreased, but for the MSI Claw, at the time of making this video, from MSI Center, which is the control software that we have built in, from the manual TDP mode, we can go as low as 20 watts up to 35 on battery or 40 on wall power. We're going to be testing both of these devices at two different TDP levels, and we're going to get kind of a hard lock at those TDPs, 20 watts and 30 watts. I'm going to run some benchmarks. We're also going to test out some gaming on this thing. But before we jump into it, I do want to give you a quick rundown on the specs here. The ROG Ally has been out in the market for some time now. Lots of great updates for this handheld. It's been my favorite Windows device so far. But when it comes to the APU, we've got the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme based on Zen 4, 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.3 GHz with a boost up to 5.1. Built-in Radeon RDNA 3 graphics with 12 compute units up to 2700 MHz, 16 GB of LPDDR5 at 6400, a 7-inch 120Hz IPS display at 1080p, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, a 40 watt-hour battery, and again, we're running Windows 11. Moving over to the MSI Claw, specs definitely do look greater than most of the other handhelds on the market, but it's really going to come down to optimizations from MSI and Intel. This handheld is powered by the new Intel Core Ultra 7 155H, 16 cores and 22 threads, 6 performance cores up to 4.8 GHz, and 8 efficiency cores up to 3.8. We've also got 2 low power efficiency cores up to 2.5. Now with this, we get the brand new Intel Arc Eye GPU up to 2.25 GHz with 8 Xe cores, 16 GB of LPDDR5 at 6400, 7-inch 120Hz IPS display at 1080p, and we also get Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4 with the MSI Claw. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the benchmarks. And for both of these, I've got it locked at 40 watts. So we've got a 40 watt TDP on that Z1 Extreme and a 40 watt TDP on that 155H. And the first benchmark we have here is 3D Mark Night Raid. Over on the left-hand side, MSI Claw with that 155H got a total score of 23,957. And the ROG Ally scored a 29,085. And if you take a look at the graphics score and CPU score, you can see that the ROG Ally with that Z1 Extreme is beating out that 155H in CPU, at least with this benchmark. But moving over to the next one, we've got 3D Mark Firestrike, and it's a totally different case, kind of flip-flop. MSI Claw with that 155H is coming ahead with a total score of 8,320. ROG Ally, 7,640. And the final one we have here is Time Spy. And I'll tell you what, in these synthetic benchmarks with that 155H, we're getting a nice jump over the ROG Ally Z1 Extreme. But is this going to transfer over to real-world performance? Because in the past, while running benchmarks on these Core Ultra CPUs, we tend to get some really good synthetic scores, but then when we move over to real-world performance, kind of falls right on its face. So let's move over to some gaming, and the first one we have here is definitely an easier one to run on these iGPUs. We've got Forza Horizon 5. Both at a 20 watt TDP, 720p, low settings, no resolution scale. Over on the left-hand side, we've got that ROG Ally coming way ahead. And I will admit that this game does favor AMD a bit, so I suspected we'd get better performance over here. And again, I tested all of these games at 20 watts and 30 watts. So with Forza Horizon 5, 20 watts on the ROG Ally, we had an average of 88. On the MSI Claw at 20 watts, 50, and of course going up to 30, 97 on the Ally, and only 60 on the MSI Claw. So yeah, at least with this one, ROG Ally coming way ahead here. Next up, we've got Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 720p, medium settings, and just to make it a little more interesting, I did record all of the 30-watt footage from now on, and straight off the bat, right in the beginning of this benchmark, we can see that the ROG Ally is coming ahead of the MSI Claw. And by the end, at 20 watts on the Ally, we had an average of 59, 20 watts on that MSI Claw, average of 38. At 30 watts, jumped up to an average of 64 on the Ally, and only an average of 42 on the MSI Claw. Here's Horizon Zero Dawn, and I really haven't had great luck with these Intel iGPUs and this game here. Not exactly sure what the issue is, but just taking a look at Afterburner in the top left-hand corner, you can see we're almost doubling the frame rate of the MSI Claw on the ROG Ally. And I completely understand that the Ally CPU, that Z1 Extreme, has been on the market longer, but the 155H has been in laptops for at least 2 months. I've been doing a lot of testing with it in different devices. And with this one, at 20 watts, ROG Ally, we had an average of 74. On the MSI Claw, 32. At 30 watts for the Ally, 81. Only 46 for the MSI Claw. So this is one of those games, at least right now, at the time of making this video, doesn't perform well at all on these Intel iGPUs. Another one I wanted to test here was Red Dead 2. I went down to 720p, low settings, and we are at 30 watt TDP on both of these devices. And yeah, at the end here, a 20 watt TDP on the ROG Ally, we got an average of 58. Over on the MSI Claw, 48. So it's not that much of a jump that we've seen with other games. And at 30 watts on the Ally, we had an average of 62 and 65 on the MSI Claw. So finally, we're coming ahead, and even the minimum was much higher on the MSI Claw with Red Dead 2. And the final game I wanted to test here was Cyberpunk 2077. We're at 720p, Steam Deck preset. Over on the left-hand side, you can see right there at 30 watts with that Z1 Extreme. And it looks like on the Ally at 20 watts, we had an average of 58. On the MSI Claw at 20 watts, only an average of 27. 30 watts jumped up to 64 on the Ally. And on the MSI Claw at 30, it only jumped up to 42 FPS. And this is one of those games that has given me issues with these ARC iGPUs. But this is one of those games that a lot of people are going to want to play on their handheld. That's why I wanted to put it in this video. And the final thing I wanted to take a look at was just a little bit of battery life. Now keep in mind the ROG Ally has a 40 watt hour battery. The new MSI Claw actually has a 53 watt hour battery. Did some testing at a 20 watt TDP and a 30 watt TDP. Cyberpunk 2077, 720p, high settings. On the MSI Claw at 20 watts, pulling around 26.5 watts from the battery. That's total power draw. At 30 watts, 35.4. And on the ROG Ally, we're actually pulling much more power here. I do have 100% screen brightness. Ally's got that 40 watt hour battery. At a 20 watt TDP with this test here, total draw on the Ally was 27.6 watts, looking at around 86 minutes of battery life. Jumping up to 30 watts, pulling around 37.3 watts on average, giving us right there at about an hour, 64 minutes. The MSI Claw is definitely coming ahead. We've got a much larger battery also. But at 20 watts, looking at around 120 minutes, and this is kind of maxed out there, 100% screen brightness, high settings with Cyberpunk. 30 watts, looking at around 90 minutes of runtime. So yeah, I mean, with that bigger battery, lower power draw at the same kind of wattage, the MSI Claw can beat the ROG Ally in battery life for sure. So right now, at the time of making this video, the MSI Claw isn't beating out the ROG Ally watt for watt. In fact, the ROG Ally came way ahead at the same kind of wattages in most of the games, except for Red Dead Redemption 2. Also went through, tested a couple others like Borderlands 3, but the results for the MSI Claw weren't great. The ROG Ally did beat it out with Borderlands 3, and even the Steam Deck, only at 15 watts, beat out the MSI Claw at 20 and 30 watts. So they definitely have a lot of work to do. I'm really hoping for some new driver updates from Intel and MSI to really unlock the performance here. And I've said it in previous videos with the MSI Claw, I just think it's a real power struggle between the CPU power and the iGPU. Taking this thing down to 20 watts doesn't allow that iGPU to clock up much because we've got 16 cores that also need power. So disabling some of those or, coming up with some kind of different power profile would definitely help with this handheld. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. I know a lot of you are probably already going to say, no, I'm not interested in it, seeing the performance here. But, if we could match the ROG Ally, I think that this would be a really awesome handheld. I love the look. They did a great job designing this thing. Feels nice in the hand, and it does have an absolutely beautiful 7-inch 120 Hz IPS display. If you've got any questions or you want to see anything else running on the Claw, let me know in the comments. Like always, thanks for watching.